So the Balance Dataslate has shook the game up a fair bit, a lot of nerfs to strong armies and buffs to a few weaker ones, but 2 days later, are we just about to go straight back to square one? Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where over the last few days we've been talking about a few of the more interesting changes from the Balance Dataslate, and some of the more interesting effects it's going to have on the game as a whole. Now the rules update has been fairly long awaited. In January we had chapter approved where Games Workshop did nerf a fair few of the strongest armies and then buff a few of the weakest ones, but then very shortly after they released Custodies, Tau and Harlequins, which kind of put the game back into a fairly bad state, the last three codexes just running fairly rampant, with very few others having a proper chance to compete. Just the other day we've had a fairly seismic shake up to 40k. This new balance patch I think has broadly done quite a good job. It's nerfed Custodies, Tau and Harlequins, the armies that were doing the strongest right now. Some really big buffs to Imperial Guard, who are at the bottom end of the pecking order, and some really solid durability buffs to Marines and Sisters with the new Armour of Contempt, who I'd argue were largely mid-tier before the change. I wouldn't necessarily say it was perfect. I think no matter what balance patch they come out with, it's not going to please anyone, and a fair few armies were kind of overlooked. Necrons and Orcs, for example, look like they're in a bit of a bad place after it. In general though, I do think it was a very decent step in the right direction. Nerf a few of the strongest armies, buff a few of the weaker ones. Certainly leaves the game in a lot more of an interesting place, with new lists having a chance to shine. But no sooner has this balance update comes out, but then we have the next codex, which might well just be causing just as bad issues as the ones that were released before. As I'm sure a lot of people watching will know, today is the day that Codex Tyranids actually goes on sale. It went on pre-order last week, so today's the day it actually becomes an official part of 40k. Usually when codexes drop, the rules are all a little bit new, people haven't really had much chance to test them out yet, so we don't know exactly how big an impact it's going to have on the meta, but Tyranids are a bit different. Probably much to Games Workshop's annoyance, the playtesters leaked the codex in full a fair few weeks early, so a lot of people have had a really good chance to experiment with the book, and we kind of know what's looking the strongest at the moment. The problem almost seems to be twofold in the Tyranids though. Not only does the core codex look really strong, easily on the same power as the previous few books that just got nerfed, but it's already got some massively powerful supplemental content in the Codex Leviathan supplement and Crusher Stampede, enormous power boosts that turn the previous and fairly weak Codex Tyranids into a real force to be reckoned with, and that's when the codex was a fairly tame one, a lot of the datasheets being kind of bad. These supplemental rules do currently remain fully legal in competitive 40k. The codex doesn't invalidate the supplemental content, just the things that it directly replaces, like the synaptic links, in the same way that, say, the Admech Codex didn't invalidate their Charadon expansion that they got a couple of weeks before the codex dropped. I found it kind of interesting that Games Workshop did not choose to rein these in the Balance Dataslate. I was kind of wondering if they would. It seemed like a pretty reasonable time to do it, as it basically meant that the Balance Dataslate would drop pretty much at the same time as the Tyranid Codex came out, so any intended changes that they had for those old rules to fit in with the new book would have been quite nice to put there. I'm not saying that they might not choose to errata these supplements at some stage, maybe in the Tyranids FAQ that comes a few weeks after the Codex, but I certainly suspect in the meantime that the Tyranids Codex is going to be oppressively strong, and it kind of puts us in a slightly silly situation where the worst excesses of cheese in 40k are once again waiting for a balance patch just 2 days after they issued one. A lot of the Tyranids' greatest rivals just got toned down, so it's pretty much open season for a new strong codex to swoop in and just devour the competition. Of course, we might or might not see the Tyranids dominating the tournament scene in the same way that Harlequins did. I guess the results from the grand tournaments and things will trickle in over the next few weeks and give us a bit more idea, but I strongly suspect they're going to, just because we have had the codex out for a few weeks now, and broadly speaking we know what they're capable of. Even if we ignore the potentially problematic supplements, then the core codex just seems ridiculously strong in itself. The datasheets, and particularly the monsters, look really meaty just in general. Loads of toughness 8, 2+ save and high wound count monsters that actually look like they're somewhat survivable against 9th anti-tank. Pretty well everything got tougher and more threatening, whether it's the biggest bugs or standard warriors and things. And in particular, maybe some of the scariest datasheets look like things like Harpies, Hive Tyrants with certain buffs, mixed role Carnifexes, and Exocrines or maybe Tyrannifexes for a bit of raw firepower. Just comparing stats side by side to quite a lot of armies, they do seem really powerful in raw might. Then, perhaps a surprising winner out of the new codex is the Tyranid Psychic phase. I already did mention the Maleceptor in another video, we might well go over a focused one on Maleceptors and Neurothropes and just what they can do. but it would appear that a Maliceptor plus a Neurothrope will often average around 10 or 20 mortal wounds in a single phase for 270 points if you do give them a little bit of support. It's just pretty potent all by itself, never mind the fact that they're kind of annoying to remove as well, and can also provide a bit of buffs to the rest of your army with their psychic as they go. Zoanthropes will be able to chip in a bit as well, and there'll likely be a few of those around due to the synaptic imperatives. Speaking of which, when layered with all these decent datasheets and the psychic bomb, you've got very good army-wide special rules as well. The synaptic imperatives can give you an all-important turn of 4 plus or 5 plus invul saves depending on the unit. There's a couple of turns of potential high damage dealing, getting exploding sixes more or less army-wide, and plenty of other useful ones for things like psychic or actions and stuff. What's more, the high fleets are just massively better as well than the 8th edition decks. Leviathan's transhuman is amazing, but plenty of the others really are quite tempting as well, things like Behemoth or Kronos perhaps. I certainly wouldn't say everything is stronger. For example, Gaunts and Gene Stealers look a bit more niche now, particularly with Flesh Borers getting affected by Armour of Contempt against a lot of factions, but it feels like the best builds for Tyranids just went to an entire extra level. It certainly feels to me like the core codex itself is going to be right at the apex of 40k, but then when you add things like Crusher Stampede onto it, it's just going to get even sillier. Crusher Stampede is that White Dwarf army of renown where you only take big bugs, no one wound infantry. I was kind of expecting it to get toned down, and maybe it will, but it hasn't yet. It gives huge buffs to a monster heavy army, and now there's even fewer trade-offs to using it, seeing as I'd argue that Gaunts and Gene Stealers maybe are a little bit less vital. I felt maybe it was a semi-necessary addition for the old monster datasheets to be good, but now they're good anyway, it's just going to get quite silly. There's 3 main benefits to the thing. Monsters getting -1 damage is huge. It meant that they were already kind of tough in the previous codex, but now a whole load of things are toughness 8, 2 plus save, and 15 wounds or more. They're just ridiculously durable for about 170 points or so. I guess the -1 damage doesn't really stack with Carnifexes, who get that innately now, but on all the other monsters in the codex, it makes them far tougher than it seems like they were intended to be. Then you also get a 5 plus invul, maybe not quite as relevant on things with 2 plus saves now, as you're going to need AP -4 to trigger it, but plenty of things do keep a 3 plus save. Things like Harpies absolutely love this, and it's pretty great on the new improved warriors. Then they're far better at taking objectives, as monsters count as the number of wounds remaining, meaning that you're usually going to need an Obsec squad to take it off them, and you certainly might have your own Obsec with some cheap warriors along. And finally, it also gives a massive amount of support for monsters, the 1 CP for that enormous mortal wound on the charge stratagem, often 6 mortal wounds against anything slightly weaker than you, meaning that even the flying Tyranids charging into combat could deal absolutely massive damage to infantry, and a few other handy ones like 2 CP for monsters fighting in death, and an alternative transhuman physiology strat. The psychic powers are pretty decent as well. You can get a 4 plus invul plus D3 attacks or re-rolling all hits in melee, all of which are very good things, and even a handy warlord trait or two, like the one that grants you extra attacks. Perhaps the single silliest way to put a lot of these together is on the Crusher Stampede Harpy, already a truly ridiculous datasheet as we've already talked about on the channel. For 170 points, it's amazing even with no buffs whatsoever, but it gains a 5 plus invul and -1 damage, and of course for 1 CP you can activate the only wounded on 4 plus thing, meaning that you need some very silly levels of firepower to take it out. Even if you're aiming at it with good ballistic skill and damage d6 weapons, it means that you need no less than 28 las cannons hitting on 3s to kill one of these if you do spend 1 CP for the stratagem. Absolutely insane for 170 points worth of model, particularly when it deals so much crazy damage itself. Their venom cannons are basically 6 super las cannons with a flat damage of 4, plus a bit of anti-infantry and its excellent bomb attack. And if you do decide to drop out of flyer mode, it's got an excellent charge threat range with a big move of 15 inches, and then 1 CP for quite a lightly 4 to 6 mortal wounds on the stratagem. You can then even soup it up even more with things like psychic powers, Catalyst would make it even tougher, synaptic imperatives where you could give it damage buffs or a 4 plus invul, or adaptive physiology which can do a number of really handy things. The Crusher Stampede Harpy is just so far off the power curve that it's ridiculous. Its durability is really silly, and if it is able to get a good turn of damage dealing off where it's able to shoot something, bomb something and charge something, you could expect around about 18 wounds to a toughness 7 or 8 vehicle. It really is kind of daft just what this thing can achieve. Even outside of Crusher Stampede though, if you choose to not take that and just go for High Fleet Leviathan instead, you're still going to be getting a fairly enormous array of benefits. If both remain fully legal, I still think that you get people using both. High Fleet Leviathan looks like it's the other really strong way to play Tyranids right now. It was pretty great with the old codex when Leviathan only gave a 6+ feel no pain if you were near to Synapse, and now it's got a huge array of benefits in the codex. All the Synapse creatures only get wounded on a 4+ now, great for Tyranid warriors, Hive tyrants, and anything else with the keyword. And even better that you can put it on anything now if you use an adaptive physiology to make any one monster a Synapse creature. That seems to be very common use on one of the Harpies that's lightly flying forward. Then it also gets the adaptive half of its High Fleet traits. It means that every single unit gets to reroll a hit roll when it shoots or fights, and you could always swap that out for one of the many other traits available if they happen to help more in your given matchup. Finally, they have an amazing psychic power as well, giving you an additional synaptic imperative on one unit per turn. As we already mentioned, that can be some really meaningful buffs, could give a 4+ invul save to something, get exploding 6s for more damage on a unit, or help allow a Maleceptor to do its thing just a little bit better, allowing it to do its psychic action while still casting spells. Then you've got the support options from the actual codex supplements. 2 of the warlord traits are really nice, either redeploying models or using Swarm Leader to get an infantry unit to reroll hit rolls. That's pretty nice on those transhuman physiology warriors. And then a bunch of really useful support stratagems, granting objective secured to one creature, exploding 6s to hits for a damage buff where you need it most, automatic death throws, and even helping with psychic defense with a 4+ to auto-deny a spell. To me it seems like it's a different flavour of Tyranids that's also very strong, maybe kind of similar in power to Crush a Stampede, even if it might feel a bit hard to turn down -1 damage on all your monster creatures. Overall, just from looking at the codex and what it's been doing so far in practice games, it makes me think that Tyranids are going to be very, very strong indeed, probably the new strongest army in the game, though I guess we'll see once they're used in tournaments in earnest and going up against a lot of the other strongest codexes there, including this new Armour of Contempt on the power armoured guys. I'd guess that even if it was just the new codex and these new supplements were just made illegal completely for whatever reason, I still think they'd do very, very well. But it looks like Crusher Stampede and Leviathan will make the problem even worse while they still remain legal. My guess would be that Games Workshop will likely rebalance Crusher Stampede in the Tyranid FAQ, if not sooner, and probably add a few keywords to the Leviathan one, maybe things like the Warlord trait affecting core units for example. Until then, they're going to make a stronger codex even worse though, in my opinion. I think this situation kind of highlights Games Workshop's balance issue. Semi-regular balance data slates I think are absolutely great for the game, they make it more interesting, nerf the strong stuff and buff the weak stuff, and hopefully have everything a bit more able to compete and more interesting to boost. The problem is though that if they just keep up the codex creep to the extent that they have been doing so far, every single codex being notably stronger than the previous ones, then it's just not going to achieve very much. It means that you might achieve a very temporary state of balance until the next overpowered book is released, and then there'll just be something that's maybe equally annoying in the meta until they get round to the next balance data slate presumably, maybe shake things up a bit, and then they just release more powerful codexes to make that irrelevant as well. Don't get me wrong, overall I think the data slate has made 40k a lot more interesting than it was a few weeks back. I'm really quite keen to see how Guard, Marines, Chaos Marines and Sisters will perform with their new buffs, and they have addressed a lot of the more problematic armies in the game. I just hope that we don't go straight back to a situation where the old top armies were nerfed, and then a whole raft of the newest and strongest codexes come in that feel like they're playing a game on the entire different level, as what happened with Tau Custodies and Harlequins earlier this year. It seems at least there's a reasonable chance of that situation just repeating itself right now, and if so, it's kind of annoying to be waiting on the latest balance patch just literally 2 days after the last one was done. If they're just not going to be able to restrain themselves from releasing a codex that isn't the new best thing in the game, then balance patches just aren't going to make much of a difference. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Sorry if I'm coming across a little bit negative there, I really don't mean to, and I'm certainly looking forward to playing 40k with some of the new changes. I've got nothing against Tyranids being one of the top armies in the game, but I hope that they just don't dominate to make it more boring for anyone else who's fighting them. That's not good for anyone, including the Tyranid players themselves. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k stuff coming. I do tend to have new videos out just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention one way in which you can help support, and that's the Auspex Tactics Patreon page, links down in the video description below. The channel's Patreon is what allows me to keep on making videos quite so regularly, so if you are enjoying a lot, any support is enormously appreciated, and channel patrons do get a fair few advantages. You get to see certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry to the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits every month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.